All right, we're about to dive into a book from 1913 that honestly reads more like a political thriller than an economic text. It was written by a real maverick congressman, Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., and he took direct aim at the biggest financial powers in America. This wasn't just some stuffy report. For him, it was an absolute declaration of war.
And Lindbergh does not beat around the bush. He opens with this bombshell of a statement. Now, you're probably wondering, what fact is he talking about? Well, he was pointing to the way prices for everyday stuff could just swing wildly, even when supply and demand seemed totally stable. For Lindbergh, that wasn't just the market being the market. No, that was proof of a rigged game, a system controlled by what he famously called the money trust.
So, who was this guy who had the nerve to take on all of Wall Street? Well, Charles August Lindbergh Sr., and yes, he was the father of the famous pilot, was a serious force to be reckoned with. He was a Swedish immigrant, a distinguished law school graduate from the University of Michigan, and he became a congressman who just refused to play by the usual party rules.
His whole journey is pretty incredible when you look at it. He gets his law degree way back in 1883, then gets elected to Congress in 1909, where he quickly becomes a leading voice for the progressive Republicans. And by 1913, his big fight against concentrated financial power leads to him publishing this very book. This wasn't some side hustle for him. This was the central battle of his entire political life.
Now, to really get what Lindbergh is arguing, we have to understand the villain of his story. And he wasn't talking about a specific company or some shadowy figure in a back room. Nope, he was describing something way more slippery: the money trust.
So here's the key. This is how Lindbergh defined his enemy. He makes it really clear that there was no formal organization you could point to. It wasn't a corporation with a CEO and a board of directors that you could take to court. And that right there was the whole point.
This was his big insight. He argued that the trust's real power, its real strength, came from the fact that it was basically invisible. Because it had no formal structure, it was pretty much immune to any legal challenge. It all worked through, as he put it, indirection. Kind of like a shared understanding and a system of incentives that got all the powerful financial players on the same page without anyone ever needing to sign a contract.
Okay, so if it wasn't some secret society, how in the world did this trust actually control the nation's economy? Well, Lindbergh claimed it was all built right into the architecture of the banking system itself.
He called it the bank reserve funnel. Let me break down how he saw it working. Your little local bank had to keep a certain amount of cash in reserve. But the law actually incentivized them with 2% interest payments to send a huge chunk of that reserve money to a bigger bank in a city. Then that city bank would turn around and send its reserves to one of the central hubs, which were mostly in New York. And what's the result? A giant, non-stop river of cash flowing from small towns all across America right into the hands of a few Wall Street financiers. And Lindbergh didn't just describe the system, he put a jaw-dropping price tag on it. He calculated that back in 1912, the banking system was costing the American people over $1.3 billion a year. Now, to put that into perspective, he claimed that was more money than it cost to run the entire United States government at the time. Just think about that. And this is the data he pointed to as his smoking gun. Just look at the growth of deposits in what he called the Big Six New York banks. It goes from less than $100 million in 1898 to almost $500 million by 1911. For Lindbergh, this was undeniable proof of that massive funnel of capital at work. So, armed with all this data and this powerful argument, Congressman Lindbergh didn't just sit back and write a book. No way. He took this fight directly to the floor of Congress. He was absolutely determined to expose this system and, maybe even more importantly, to stop it from getting even stronger. His number one target was a piece of legislation called the Aldrich Plan. Lindbergh saw this bill as the money trust's big move to basically cement its control over the country's finances for the next half-century. He called his own push for an investigation a flank move. It was a strategic attack designed to completely derail the bill by exposing the rotten system that created it. But here's where the story takes a turn. Lindbergh got his investigation, but he claimed it was immediately co-opted. See, he wanted a real, no-holds-barred investigation to get the facts out there for true reform. But instead, he alleged the committee was stacked with the trust's buddies, who then turned around and hired a Wall Street lawyer to run the whole investigation. The very tool for reform, he argued, was being wielded by the establishment.
And the pushback he faced was relentless. He claimed his original tough-as-nails resolution was swapped out for a weaker, watered-down version. He faced all sorts of personal attacks, with false stories being spread about him back home in Minnesota. He even said a part of the press was basically paid off to oppose him. But you know what the most telling detail is? He said he got hundreds of letters from bankers who secretly supported him, but were too terrified of the money trust's power to ever say so in public.
So what do we make of all this? What's the big takeaway from this crusade from over a century ago? Well, Lindbergh's fight leaves behind this really powerful and provocative legacy, one that raises some fundamental questions about power and money that, let's be honest, we are still talking about today.
This, right here, was Lindbergh's most crucial point. He wasn't on a witch hunt for individual bad bankers. He was fighting the system itself, a set of rules that he believed would always, inevitably, concentrate wealth and power no matter who was running it. He put the ultimate blame not on the bankers, but on the American people for just letting a system like that exist in the first place.
And just to give you a sense of how truly threatening his ideas were considered at the time, after this book, he wrote another one called Why Is Your Country at War? In it, he argued that high finance was the real reason America got into World War I. According to some reports, the actual printing plates for that book were seized and destroyed by government agents. Clearly, his crusade had hit a major nerve. So that really leaves us with one final big question. More than 100 years ago, a lone congressman stood up and argued that the design of a financial system is more powerful than the intentions of the people inside it. When we look at our own complex financial world today, you just have to ask yourself, does that argument still hold true?